Hello.
Hi, y'all. We are so excited to have you all here. Thanks for joining. Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Where's everyone tuning in from tonight or morning, wherever you may be in the world? Share what city you're joining us from. We're so excited to have a chat with you.
Yes, pop in the chat where you're joining us from. I'm in New York City on the Shinnecock Nation, and we want to pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging today as well. So pop in the chat where you are joining us from today. Oh, New York, baby. Woohoo. Hello, Hanya.
Love that. Oh,
Brisbane. Hi.
Lots of Australians. I love it.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Well, listen, we are going to have an awesome conversation today. This is going to be pulling back the curtains and sharing how we all made the transition from full-time life, side hustle life, I should say, to full-time hustle. My name is Meggie Palmer. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called PepTalkHer, and we're on a mission to close the gender pay gap because it really, really sucks. And I'm really excited to be joined by two fabulous women, Doone and Ellen, who have amazing businesses, which if you don't already follow them, you should. We're going to be popping links into the chat so you can all stay in touch. But listen, Ellen, let me hand it over to you. Do you want to give us the cliff notes on you, your backstory before we jump into our conversation today?
Yeah, absolutely. So, hey, everyone, great to meet you. If this is our first time, my name is Ellen. I am the podcast host of Cubicle to CEO. We are a financially transparent content platform highlighting different entrepreneurs making 6, 7, and 8 figures a year. So we love sharing the stories of underrepresented voices in business media, including hopefully some of you all someday soon. And as far as my story, the 30-second version is I quit my corporate job without a backup plan when I was 23, started out as a freelance social media manager, which you'll hear about in my side hustle today, and then eventually grew that into an agency, became an educator. We've mentored over 10,000 students in our online courses. And then now, most recently, we have our media company.
We love to hear it. We love to hear it. And Doone and Ellen, you're met through another friend of ours who runs an amazing company called Norby. You met not long ago, right?
Yeah, not too long ago. But it feels like I've known Doone for a long time.
Yeah, I feel like we knew each other in the sense of probably connecting online. Like I knew who you were before I got introduced to you. So
yeah,
love that for us.
That's the best part of this online community, you know, the relationships that you will make. I can truly say that's my favorite part of owning a business is all the amazing people I never would have had the chance to meet if not for the business.
It's so crazy as well thinking about all the people like you and I haven't met in real life. And there's all these like relationships and friendships that we have that we talk on the phone and we haven't met in person yet. It's so weird meeting people in person and you're like, oh my gosh.
Yes, exactly.
Doone, I think you and I became friends through like we were internet friends first. No, wait, were we? Or
no, we met through LMB.
In London. That's right.
We met in London through LMB.
And for those of you who don't know, Like-Minded Bitches Drinking Wine is a Facebook group of female entrepreneurs. So we'll pop the link to that as well in case you want to join that. But Doone, talk us through your side hustle to, you know, meteoric rise into very much full-time hustle now with the Female Startup Club.
Yes. Well, let me introduce myself. I'm Doone. Female Startup Club is a media company I started from my bedroom floor back in 2020. And we have a podcast. It's all about, I feel like I'm just repeating things that Ellen has said because we have so many similarities, but I interview founders who have done 7, 8, and 9 figure annual recurring revenue. And we understand the blueprint when it comes to money, marketing, and mistakes, specifically around people who are women who are around CPG, e-commerce brands, all the brands that you know. And we have a newsletter, we have a community, private community for founders. It's all super fun. But my journey from the beginning when it comes to a side hustle is not related. I started my background kind of more in visual communications, and my skill set has always been things like social media, graphic design, copywriting. But my first side hustle was I used to work in fashion for this company in Australia called The Iconic when it was like a real baby company. And I would buy a lot of clothes discounted, and I would also get gifted a lot of clothes because I worked in social media. So I would create content for free for brands on my own channels. And I had like a really small blog at the time. And I just loved that because I got given the clothes for free. But classic arbitrage, I would sell the clothes on eBay or at markets. And that was kind of my like first intro to selling online. And I was able to do the eBay thing.
Well, and shout out to anyone else who's doing bits and pieces like that, because I can relate to it. I remember selling like nasty old handbags on eBay and making like $10, $7, $15.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is a thing. I'll take it. But put an emoji in the chat and let us know if you've ever done the eBay thing, if you've ever Airbnb'd out a spare room, illegally Airbnb'd out your place when you went traveling. Hello. I hope my landlord's not watching. Because, you know, this is all part of the process for a lot of us in starting to make money outside of your full-time job. So let us know if you can relate to any of those things. Ellen, did you ever do the eBay thing as well?
You know, never did eBay, but I've done Poshmark, Facebook Marketplace. You know, I think it's like such an easy way to kind of get the thrill of, oh, there's other ways to earn money outside of a paycheck, a regular paycheck. And so I'm really excited to dive into all the ways we've side hustled together today.
Definitely. And this is going to be an interactive session. So listen, you're welcome to keep your cameras off, but if you feel inclined to turn your cameras on, that is amazing for us, because then we can kind of feel like we're getting to know you. We can see your expression. We can see if our jokes that are so hilarious are actually funny or if they're falling flat. But let us know in the chat as well, any questions that you have for any of us today. We are open books and happy to share our journeys from full-time life to side hustle. I remember when I was a journalist, I spent 15 years as a foreign correspondent. And I remember one day someone said to me when I was out on a shoot, "Oh, Meggie, do you do media training on the side?" I definitely did not. And I was like, "Oh, yep, yes, I do actually. It's funny you should ask." And then he was like, "Cool. So could you run a session in 2 weeks for us?" And I was like, yep. And so I was like Googling how to run media training, like asking for advice. And so it's funny that first, I don't know how much it was, maybe $500 or $600, that first session. And now, you know, when our business grew, we were charging $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 for a session. But that first paycheck was so exciting to realize that actually I had skills outside of a newsroom that could be paid forward to other people. I could serve other people with my skills and I could actually be compensated for that. So that was exciting. That was my first paycheck outside of the full-time world. Ellen, what was yours?
Yeah, you bring up such a great point, by the way, Meggie. I just want to pull it out for everybody that oftentimes when you're starting as an entrepreneur, whether it's a side hustle or whether you jump in full-time, it's so easy to discount all of your past experiences and relationships that you've built in your corporate career or even in your life. Like maybe you've, you know, had a stint where you're a stay-at-home parent or whatever role you've taken on outside of a traditional job. But I just want to remind you all that so many of your skills, like Meggie mentioned, are transferable, and your relationships too, even if they seem unrelated to the new path you're going to take. You never know who knows someone else. So don't discount the people in your life. But to answer the actual question, my first freelance check was for $300. And ironically, it was super exciting, not because it necessarily changed my life in terms of, you know, paying the bills, but it changed my life all the same in that it opened my eyes to this opportunity that I could monetize skills and knowledge I already had outside of a job structure. And so how that all came about is when I quit my job at the end of 2017, I mentioned I was very young. I was 23, pretty naive, was not planning to start a business, by the way. I just knew that the job I was in was not the right fit for me. So I was actually planning to go into another marketing role at another company. But while I was searching for jobs, one of my coworkers actually at the job that I had just left, I didn't really know this until the end of my employment there, but him and his wife owned these local coffee stands, and they had heard through the grapevine that I knew a thing or two about Instagram marketing. So they asked me if I would be willing to help them launch their presence on Instagram, create some content for them. And again, this is such a great lesson into why, because if I had just, you know, looked at him from the lens of my relationship to him as a coworker, I would have been like, oh, you're a project manager at a health plan company, right? I never in a million years would have thought of him as a potential first client for this career that I hadn't even really imagined for myself. But because I took the time to explore and to share, you know, some of the things that I'm good at, he realized there was that light bulb moment, and we had that connection that then allowed me to sign them as our first social media client.
Love it. And is that coffee shop still going? Your business is thriving. Is the coffee shop still thriving as well, I wonder?
The coffee shop is still thriving. It has transferred ownership a few times, but it's still there. And every time I'm in town, I try to go by and grab a coffee to go.
That's so cool. I love it. And it's funny how from little things, big things grow. And we'll talk more about the success that Ellen's had. But Doone, what about you? What was your first side hustle paycheck?
So outside of the eBay thing, I, again, was just utilizing my skill set. I knew that I was good at things like social media, copywriting, website design. And so the first thing I was doing when I worked in a corporate full-time 9-to-5 thing was writing freelance articles just on a like retainer basis, ongoing kind of thing. It was all really low amounts of money, like nothing kind of crazy, but I was able to scale up and scale down, which when you have a client like that for articles, you're able to pitch more and kind of like increase. So that kind of like led me into doing similar to what you were saying, Meggie, where you just said yes to that person asking you, oh, can you do this? I had people starting to ask me like, oh, could you do like some social media graphic design posts for our brand? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Like definitely can. Or can you do our website copywriting? Yeah, absolutely can do that. And so I was just doing those kind of projects on the weekends to kind of supplement my income, not related to what I do now, but I mean, I guess it is related actually, but not, I don't offer services like that now. But yeah, just, I guess when you're doing your own kind of self-audit, self-searching of what you're going to be able to do, you need to look at the skill sets that you already have, look at the things that you enjoy doing and still give you energy versus like that feeling of, oh shit, I don't want to do that. Like I'm depleted by it. And then just putting that out into the universe, asking friends, asking colleagues, asking someone if they have a referral, just putting it out there, getting into groups, Facebook groups, Reddit, those kind of forums. And I feel like once you start putting things out there, then things start coming back.
It's such a great point, Doone, that you make as well. Like when you're trying to figure out like what should your side hustle be, trying to identify something that brings you joy as opposed to stuff that maybe you're really good at, but it kind of sucks the energy out of you. Because it's funny, like when I was a journalist, I had a media training company as my side hustle after old mate asked me to do it. And I figured out how to teach it. And turns out I was quite a good media trainer. And it became quite a big business on the side. But I was like, it was the reason I could quit journalism as well. Actually, it's the reason I quit my job as a foreign correspondent, because I knew worst case scenario, I'd make 60 to 80 grand, because I knew like, oh, I could make 5 and 10 grand here. If I cobbled it together, I could pay the rent. I'd be fine. But I just like, I ran it for a couple of years and I was like, I'm really good at this. It could make quite a lot of money, but it just like wasn't 10 out of 10. I was like, it's like a 6 or a 7 out of 10. Like I'm good at it and I can do it and it's very lucrative, but it's not really my calling in the world. To your point, Doone, trying to find, and it takes time. Like, you know, I had to do the Airbnb on the side thing. I had to sell stupid old handbags on eBay, like figuring bits and pieces out to eventually come to the place where now, I guess it's been 4 or 5 years that I've been, maybe only 4 years, full-time on PepTalkHer. But you have to, you know, make those iterations, and it can take, like, I don't know, Ellen, how long did it take you to get from when you very first started side hustling to where you are today?
Well, you know, when I landed that $300 client, okay, this is just something you'll have to know about me. Those of you who know me personally already would not be surprised by this. I am very impulsive when it comes to huge life decisions, right? Like things that don't make sense on paper, I'll just jump at. But when it comes to minute details that don't matter, like what should we eat for dinner? Oh my God, you will be hard pressed for me to make that final decision. It's the worst. So anyways, when I got that first client, I just kind of had this moment where I was like, you know, I could keep sending out resumes and applying for jobs and just doing this on the side. Or if I just expanded my capacity and focused all my energy on getting another client, like if I can sign this client for $300, could I sign my next client for 500? Could that third client be 1,000? Could I try upselling that $1,000 client to a $2,000 client, and on and on? And so basically I made that decision right then and there. I'm not going to apply for any more jobs, and I'm just going to give myself like 60 to 90 days in this season and see what happens. And actually what ended up happening was we scaled our social media client base to 6 figures in revenue within that first 12 months. And I don't think I ever expected that when I started. But that's kind of like, you know, that first year in business, and here we are 5 years later, and a lot has changed in the business, but that's how the path ended up going.
Amazing. Amazing. And it's interesting, Ellen, when you look at the statistics, and Doone, you can probably speak more to this, like when you're trying to figure out, like, do you just side hustle and like side hustle while you've got a full-time job? I know we had a question that came through about that. If you have a really big business idea, do you raise money like from venture capitalists or private equity or friends and family, or how do you do that? It's not an easy decision, but like my favorite thing to tell folks who are thinking about starting a business, because by the way, it's not for everyone. I think it really suits the three of our personalities, because we don't mind the uncertainty, we don't mind the highs and the lows that come with it, but it's certainly not for everyone. And there's no shame, by the way, in loving your 9 to 5 or your 7 to 7, whatever the case may be, and having a brilliant career. There's no shame in that. And I often think like a great way to start is to kind of test it. If you have an idea, I noticed Sharon on the call was just mentioning she does resume audits. Like rather than quitting your 6-figure job and starting a resume audit company, maybe just like start offering it to friends and family on the side, maybe start posting it about on LinkedIn, seeing could you get 2 or 3 clients a month? And then maybe that will give you the confidence potentially to feel better when you do decide to leave your job. But Doone, was that a hard decision for you when you were trying to figure out when to make that pivot?
No, I like hated the corporate life. Sorry, my dog's like on my lap and she wants to get down. Corporate life wasn't for me. I loved working in a startup at the Iconic. It was like so fun, so exciting. You could wear any hat you wanted, and it was just so scrappy. And that was the first time I had kind of the introduction to a startup life. And I was like, wow, I couldn't see myself being like my boss or my boss's boss or like that kind of thing. But the guys at the top, I was like, that's pretty cool. And then from that, I had the seed of like, I want to do something one day. Moved overseas when it started to get a bit more corporate, wanted to do the next thing, excited about travel, all that kind of stuff. And I moved into a corporate role and I absolutely hated it. It was so bad for my personality and for my soul. So I quit after 3 months, but in the UK, there's sometimes like a 3-month workout, like notice period. So I was probably there for almost 6 months. And in that time, I met this guy who is now my husband. And he was like, oh, you should come and work with us. Like, he was building a tech software company at the time. And he was like, it's not VC backed. So he was like, we need to start an agency model on the side to fund the development of the tech. That's like not my skill set. Content, all that kind of stuff. And you have a good network. So like you can just run that and have equity in the business and all that kind of thing. So I was able to get an introduction of starting and running and growing a business, but without it being totally me or like my responsibility 100%. And that was how I kind of started the transition. And then during that process, I realized that I wasn't like passionate enough about the software that he was building. He still has that software today. And I was like, I also just think because we were like fully together and all that kind of stuff, I was like, I want to separate and do my own thing. So I've started many different things to try. I started a jewelry brand and I did that for a couple of years. I realized it wasn't the product for me, but I absolutely loved it. And then that's what kind of led me to, pivot, iteration. That's what led me to 2020 when I started the podcast. Well, I officially started on social media in 2019. And then the pandemic hit. The pandemic changed a lot of things. And I was like, I'm over the jewelry brand and it's not for me. And no one wants jewelry right now. The world is suffering. And so I was going to be at home all the time. I started recording like 7 days a week, just talking to anyone and everyone I could. And that's when the podcast kind of started to pick up. And I was like, oh, this is really fun. Maybe I should see if I could get a sponsor. Landed a sponsor for $25,000 for a year deal. And I was like, I've got a business. And then I was like, I love this. But it took years of like iteration. And I think that something a lot of people say on the show is it takes 10 years to reach overnight success. So everyone's like, oh, they just started this thing and it's killing it and it's doing so well. But it is that 10 years of like hustling, figuring out what you don't like, moving towards the things that you do like to finally get to the thing that starts to kind of pick up and take off. I forget what the
I just want to piggyback Doone off of what you said, because I feel like that's such an important lesson for everyone who's here tonight. Is I think the number one thing I see hold people back from making any sort of leap, whether it's full-time business or side hustling, is that they really believe that they have to have a solid plan mapped out, right? And it's like, I have to know step A, B, C, and this is where I'm going. And they will not make any sort of move until they know for certain that this is what they're supposed to be doing. But to Doone's point, I can really relate to a lot of the things you shared, Doone, because in the same way, I like right now, Doone and I both run media companies. I did not start with a media company, right? I started as a freelance social media manager. And even then I was like, I don't know really what I'm building toward. I was just open and curious. And as long as something interested me, I was like, I'm willing to lean in just enough to explore what this path looks like until it's no longer the right fit. And then whatever I discover in the process, and then more importantly, the people that I meet while I'm experimenting in that's what's going to open my mind to the next thing. And I think that's the thing that most people don't really understand, but I hope that you really take this to heart, is that when you try to dream from the current place you're in, sitting right in tonight, your viewpoint of what is possible in your life is limited by your current and past experiences, right? So if you took me from 5 years ago and you asked me, would you want to found a media company? To be honest, I would be like, I don't even know what a media company is. Like, I wouldn't even have had the wherewithal to think of something like that, because my experiences had not yet shaped me to allow me to see that as a possibility. So my encouragement to you is, if you don't quite know like where you're even headed, that's fine. Just pick one thing, anything that has interest to you, that opens and sparks curiosity in you, and be willing to just do one action within that, and realize that sometimes the win from that is actually realizing that thing is not for you, and that's just as valuable as finding something that is for you. So that's just my 2 cents there.
Yeah,
You know
really
what else I was thinking before you said something, Meggie? My advice to people is not to quit your day job, like ever, like as in, yes, ever, one day. But like my advice is always like, start by testing the waters. Don't think like, oh, I need to like quit my job and put that pressure on yourself of then having to make money to pay the bills. Use the money from your 9 to 5 as the investment into yourself and what you want to do on the side. And don't let yourself have the pressure that comes from being so reliant on the income that will come from the new business, because it might not work out. And so on the same kind of topic, I think we kind of touched on the VC thing. My advice is, when you're really early on, and if you're new with an idea that isn't something, if you've got something that's like a first of its kind in its world, it's a medical device that's going to change the system, and you're uniquely positioned because you are a doctor or you've studied medicine, and yes, maybe then you need to go out and raise, millions of dollars to be able to build those prototypes and blah, blah, blah. But if you've got an idea for a beauty brand or a homewares company or something like that, like, you don't need to raise money. You need to find a way to start small and build from there, because you don't have any leverage when it's just an idea. And an idea is just an idea. Everything needs to be executed on, and it's all the action that kind of makes it make something. And so when it comes to raising capital, there are so many other ways to find funding. For example, grants, for example, loans, credit cards, all that kind of stuff. And not that I'm recommending that necessarily to get started, but there's other ways to find capital before trying to find a business partner who essentially becomes your boss.
Mm-hmm. And I remember doing an accelerator, Doone, to your point early on, like back when I was really pissed off about the gender pay gap. I got paid less as a journalist, and I was like, this is bullshit. How do I like make sure it doesn't happen to other people? I want to build an app. How do I do that? So I joined this accelerator. And it was a bit bro-y, but one of the things they did teach me was talk about your idea. Like, because a lot of people are like, I've got this idea, but I can't say too much. We're in stealth mode. And it's like, I mean, to Doone's point, maybe if you're a microchip engineer, maybe you should be in stealth mode, but like for 90% of us, it's probably not necessary. And you should talk about it, because people might be like, oh, do you mean like this startup that's just raised $20 million? Or do you mean like my friend's company? Or I would never buy that, but I would buy that. Or I want to give you money to coach me now, or to buy that thing now. Like, talking about it will help you iterate your idea, will help you figure out if it's amazing, if it's okay, if it needs work. Some people will hate your idea and think that you're silly, and that's okay too. You have to have the resilience to push through. I'm sure we've all been told that our idea was silly in many ways. Who knew that my company, which is focused on the gender pay gap, the biggest source of our revenue is Fortune 500 companies? It doesn't really make a lot of sense. You would think that companies wouldn't really want to talk about that, but as the case is, that's a big part of our revenue. So it's funny how the twists and turns of your business, where they lead you, as Ellen was saying earlier. Also, shout out to Brooke, who's kind of bucked the trend, and she did quit her full-time job to start her business. So I'd love to hear more about that in the chat, Brooke. Let us know. Lots of questions coming through about pricing. So if you've never done the thing that you want to do, how do you figure out what to charge? A lot of what we talk about at PepTalkHer is about pricing and negotiation. So I have lots of thoughts on this, but Ellen, when you first started that agency, did you just like pluck a number out of the air? Because that's pretty much what I did, but I don't know, did you have a more strategic idea about it than I did?
It's a little bit of a gut feeling, I got to say. I think it's pretty common that most people, their first client or even first handful of clients, you're likely going to be undercharging just because you don't know what you don't know, right? But I think the key there is that with every new client, you can implement incremental pricing, meaning like if I sign my first client for $300, maybe my next client, I ask 400, and then the next one 500, and you just kind of keep testing the limits and seeing like where that upper limit is for your current skill set. And this is something that I just want to share because I feel really, really passionate about it. Most of the time when people are asking, what should I charge? A common piece of advice that's shared is, oh, well, make sure you charge your worth. Or if they're being sassy, they're like, charge your worth and add tax. I've got to admit, I've always been really, I don't know. I don't love that advice, mostly because I really think that your worth as a person, as a human being, is infinite, right? There's actually no monetary price tag that you could possibly attach to what your worth is. And quite frankly, your clients and your customers are not thinking about what you as a human are worth when they're paying you for your goods and services. So instead, I think what's smarter to think about is money is one form of value, but it's not the only form of value. Value also comes in the form of time. It comes in the form of energy. And so when you think about the service or product you're creating, you want to think mostly about what is the problem I'm solving for someone? And is it an urgent problem, or is it kind of a delayed problem? Is it a small micro problem, or is it a macro problem? Because the more urgent and the bigger the problem you solve, the more value it is producing in someone's life by either adding more money, adding more time, or adding more energy back into their lives. And so if you think about it, if you're solving a huge problem for someone that's really, really urgent, they're probably going to be willing to pay a lot more for that than someone who is buying something that is, I could have it, I couldn't have it. It brings me a little bit of joy, but it doesn't really solve a huge need for me. So I would really challenge you to think about whatever you're creating. Ask yourself, if someone were to exchange their money to me, which is a form of value, what type of value am I exchanging back to them that's equivalent or greater to the money that they're giving me in the form of those three things: time saved, energy returned, or money added to their pocket.
There's a really good book as well that you can read. It's a little bit bro-y, but it's by Alex Hormozi, and he gives you a formula for how to come up with $100 million offer or something like crazy like that. But the framework within the book gives you a great way to think about pricing and making a compelling offer to someone else that they will want to buy it. So instead of being like, oh, I do writing services and some articles on the side, you come up with this thing that's going to increase their revenue. I don't know off the top of my head, but it basically helps you kind of shift your mindset in how to create a compelling offer for someone on the other side, and how to charge like a higher price point so that you're pedaling for one client instead of 10, which becomes a lot harder. If you're charging $100 for something, well, how can you just charge 1,000 and then get one client instead of trying to get 10? So it's a really good book. And I think they do it on audiobook and stuff as well. So you can listen to it in the car.
I love that. We'll pop the, there we go. Thanks, Brooks. Pop the link to that book in the chat. Thank you. Sounds like a really great book. I actually haven't read that one. But yeah, I think also to Doone's point, when you think about what your side hustle is, like if you're selling sunscreen, you're not selling sunscreen, you're selling prevention of sun cancer or whatever. Or if you're, we don't sell a group coaching program at PepTalkHer, we're selling a fast-tracked way to get a pay raise and a promotion a lot quicker. So it's like there's the thing that you do, but actually what is the outcome that someone gets as a result of buying your product, of being a sponsor of, the Cubicle to CEO podcast or the Female Startup Club podcast? Yes, you're a sponsor, but you're also getting exposure to this particular niche audience, et cetera, et cetera. So trying to reframe that is super helpful.
You're selling the transformation, not the product. You're never selling writing, I'm saying writing, but like social media management. You're not selling that. You're selling whatever it might be.
You're selling the building of the brand, you're selling a higher, higher funnel conversion, or, all those kinds of things. A lot of people asking as well, like, how do you balance the full-time work with the side hustle? And like, how do you know where to set boundaries? Which is something that I definitely did not nail at the start. Like, I got quite anxious actually when I first was side hustling, and it kind of grew. And then I was like, when I first went from full-time to full-time side hustle, I had panic attacks for the first time. So I don't know if you both balanced it better than I did, because I think I have good balance now, but it's taken me like 7 years to get here. But at the start, I was a wreck. It wasn't easy for me.
I think the reality is that nothing is easy. And so when you're early on, maybe in your career, or you're early on in the side hustle business building journey, the reality is like, you're going to have to put a lot of time into it to make it work. And you are going to have to dedicate extra hours after work, extra hours on the weekend. And that's a compromise. You're going to have to change your social life or what you're doing on the weekends to commit the time and the energy needed to be able to make something work. It doesn't just happen without that time investment. So I think that things like burnout and balance kind of are, well, unbalance is kind of a reality, because otherwise it doesn't get started. And I don't know, I think you just have to go all in and commit to that and be like, yeah, I'm going to balance it in the future, because it requires a lot of effort.
What do you think, Ellen? Do you think you can have balance from the start when you're side hustling?
I tend to agree with Doone that, well, first of all, I'm speaking about this from the perspective that I wasn't balancing a full-time job with side hustling, right? Because I just
true.
cold cut quit.
Yeah.
However, this, I don't know if this exactly answers your question, but it's a way that I like to think about balance that has helped me is instead of making balance the goal, because true balance in definition means like two things at equilibrium, right? Which if you think about, doesn't actually make a whole ton of sense, because it means you have to be perfectly unmoving. You're not really making progress in either direction, in either your full-time career or your side hustle. So the way I like to think about my goals is, instead of saying I want to be balanced or perfectly balanced, I say I want things in my life to be in harmony, meaning like they support each other. And I understand that in different seasons, I will need to invest more time or more energy in a certain thing. And in other seasons, I may need to pull back from that. So it's not always going to look like an equal split, but as long as I feel like my life is harmonious and I'm, the way I'm spending my time is actually aligning with my priorities, then I'm okay with that. So that's kind of my perspective.
And I also think that goes back to like talking about, if you're doing a side hustle or something that's bringing you energy and getting you excited versus depleting you, that can lead to like, burnout and feeling really bad. But if you're working really late, but it's because you've like signed a new client, you're really excited about it, and like it's leading to this goal where you're seeing your savings go up and you're able to kind of reach that tipping point where maybe you can quit your job. That's really exciting. And so maybe it's not balanced, but it's like helping you and kind of fueling you to keep going, versus like you're doing something you hate and then you're having to stay up until 1 o'clock in the morning and you're like, fuck, I do not want to do this right now. Like that sucks. So yeah, I like that, the harmony thing. That's great.
And it's funny, I feel like harmony, to your point, Ellen, is easier to find when you're in alignment and when you're doing stuff that you like, because yes, it's work. Yes, yes, you have to have hours in the calendar, or you're running coaching calls, or you're meeting with sponsors or going to events or whatever. But when it feels like it's in alignment with where you feel like you can really serve people and the impact that you want to have, it doesn't annoy me as much. Like, even though I work weird hours, I doesn't feel like I work that hard, even though people are like, are you crazy? You definitely work hard, but I don't feel like I do, because it doesn't feel like, because I guess I'm in my zone of genius. And that's one thing I would say, like, one of the things that I did when I left my full-time job was like do a lot of self-help work and like coaching work to really understand myself, because everyone here on this call has so many strengths and so many gifts. And I would love for you all to understand those more deeply, so that if and when you want to start a side hustle or grow it even more, you are better equipped to figure out who you need to support you. So I really recommend people do the Gallup Strength Finders. I love that assessment. It's like $20 and it gives you your top 5 strengths. And I found that really helpful to better understand like who I am, why I'm really good at some things, and on the flip side of that, why I'm honestly really bad at some stuff. And so that's what I had to hire for very early on, was my amazing executive assistant, who helped support me in the stuff that I'm really bad at. And that's not my zone of genius, but that she's really strong in. So that's one little tip that helped me figure out how to muddle through building a team, as well as it grew from a side hustle.
Oh, I'll have to take that assessment. I don't think I've actually done that one yet, but speaking of strengths, we did just launch a quiz last week. It's 10 questions, multiple choice. So not as intense as an assessment, but you can get through it in 2 minutes. And it actually breaks down, it categorizes you as one of 4 CEO styles. So it tells you like what your unique business genius is so that you can really lean into, like Meggie mentioned, lean into your strengths as a leader. So I'll drop that in the chat if you're curious, but if you're watching the replay, it's ellenyin.com/quiz. And I'm super fascinated to know what each of you are, like what your specific CEO style is, because I think you'll be really encouraged once you understand how you move through the world to better understand how you can do business in a way that, to Maggie's point, feels in alignment with you. So you're not trying to like make yourself fit into the mold of other people that you've seen have success, because we're not all wired the same, and what works for someone else may not work at all for you. So I think the more you can understand yourself as a person and as a leader, the easier it's going to be to really be in flow with what actually lights you up.
Truly. And starting as soon as possible to really surround yourself with folks who have the same mindset as you. Because there's a lot of people are not supposed to be in business. A lot of people have no interest in a side hustle. They have no interest, and that's totally fine. But then it can be a bit disheartening if your best mate has no interest and you're like, I want to do this thing. And they're like, why? Ew, no. And then you're like, oh, maybe it's a shit idea. Oh. But if you surround yourself with people who are like, yes, and what's your other ideas? And yes, let me help you. Yes, have you tried this technology? Let me introduce you to Joanne. Let me meet Lisa. Come to this event. Like, those are the people that you need to find, right? And I would suggest like definitely follow Cubicle to CEO and Ellen on all of the socials. And same with Doone. She's built that amazing community with Female Startup Club as well. If you want to get a little clearer on how to negotiate to earn more money right now while you're in a job, you can definitely check out the PepTalkHer resources as well, to try and maximize what you're earning now so that you have a bigger safety net as and when you decide to take that leap. Join the Facebook groups, go to IRL events. There's heaps of, there's lunchclub.com. I don't know if you all have heard of that. It's a really cool free online networking platform where you can meet different people from around the world and learn from them. And I feel like that really helped me get through those first couple of years. Did you have people that really supported you when you were like just starting out?
Oh, 100%. Actually, one of the very first investments I made with that $300 check that I got from that client is I immediately invested $49 of it. I remember this clearly because at the time I was like, ooh, that's a sixth of my money. Like that's all I have. So it felt like a lot back then. But I took $50 and I invested in it was kind of like a group coaching / membership program specifically for social media managers. And I got to say, it wasn't even the tactics that I learned in that program that really, I think, propelled me forward. It was truly just being in community with other people who were building a similar type of business to me and sharing similar struggles and being able to have just, other people's insights, because it's so easy to get stuck in your own mind and be in that tunnel vision where, we all get stuck in the stories that we tell ourselves. Right. And so it's so amazing to have people to hold you accountable and to encourage you and to show you that you're not alone in what you're going through. So absolutely any community you can plug yourself into, I think is like one of the best investments you can make, whether it's a free group or a paid group.
Absolutely. I think as well, like there are lots of free groups online, especially on Facebook, like-minded bitches drinking wine is one. But on the paid side of things for us, like what we've seen by having this private monthly membership where women who are building e-commerce brands can come in and meet other women who are either just ahead or just behind and are going through the same challenges in that early stage of building a business. It's hard to like communicate until you're in there and you see it. But the magic that happens when someone's like, arrives to one of the weekly calls and is like, this really bad thing happened, like all my stock got broken or like whatever, I didn't have insurance, like what do I do? And for other people to rally around and be like, here's what to do, I've got a contact, let me help you do this. And like seeing that magic, it's called magic, by the way, with a J, seeing that magic inside magic and the support of like other women and other founders who know how to help you in your times of like trouble or success is just so amazing. And I think network is just, it's so powerful. And I think, Ellen, you said this before, you might know someone from your first job, like back in the day, and you don't really think too much of it, but 10 years later, that person might come back around. They might DM you on LinkedIn or something. And it's so important to kind of like always foster your relationships, no matter where you are in work, career, friendships, every job, like for the future.
100%. I think there's so many people who I met for a completely different reason or circumstance or season in life, and they come back into play months, years down the line in just very, very unexpected ways. So actually, this just happened to me as proof of this story. A woman who was sitting next to me at orientation on day one of my corporate job that I quit, um, she ended up through it's a very roundabout story, but she ended up referring me to a client who originally hired me just to help manage their social, their inbound Facebook comments, because they got so many customer service questions every day. And it was like a very small gig. It was meant to be temporary. But during that time, I started sharing ideas. Again, it's always easier to upsell an existing client than to find a new one. So I was providing all these different ideas for their strategy. And within a month, they had expanded my scope of work from just answering Facebook comments to managing their entire social media strategy, which was wild at the time. But full circle, 5 years later from that moment, this past winter, that woman from years ago hosted her first gala for her nonprofit, which helps families struggling with infertility, and specifically first responder families. And she actually asked if Cubicle the CEO would be willing to sponsor the gala. So we got to be a sponsor for this gala supporting families with infertility. And it was such a beautiful moment, because I was like, this is insane. Like, I wouldn't even be at this gala. I wouldn't even have this brand if not for that connection or for that person believing in me all those years ago. And how cool to come full circle and now support her in this way. So truly, you just never know who will make an impact on your life. Never discount a person for how you originally met them. In fact, even today, I'm just like looking at all of your names, but don't take this opportunity for granted. Like, look virtually to the people to your right and left, and reach out and see how you can connect, because you never know who the person that you're like sitting next to in the Zoom room could literally change your life. That's
It's true. And you know what they say, like, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And it is so true. And especially in business. We want to respect your time. So we're going to wrap this up soon. So if you've got any final questions, pop it in the chat. But there is one question that's come through a couple of times, specifically about, can you build a business without being the face of it? And what if you hate social media and you have no interest in being on camera? Because I know the three of us, a part of our income we all make through social media, brand deals, etc., through our communities and all that kind of stuff. And we are all publicly the face of our business, for better or worse sometimes. What do you think? Can you do? I mean, I've seen people do it both. People will always, in my experience, people will always say, and certainly if I put my journalism PR hat on, it's an easier story if there is a person, like a true person behind the brand or the business. Like, people don't really want to write stories about some random faceless brand, but they do want to write about you and why you started that business and what your experience was. That is interesting. And I think people want to follow that as well from a social media perspective. But I know that there's businesses that do it without that. And Doone, you've interviewed a lot of them. So have you, Ellen. What is your take? I reckon push through it and get involved, but it comes with risks.
I think there's two parts to my answer. The first is, I've interviewed more than 500 of the world's most successful founders at this point, and they all have a brand persona. They're all linking into their socials, maybe in the beginning, actually very much the face of the brand. And I think that the landscape of content has changed. In today's world, well, a few years ago, pre-iOS 14 updates, you were able to build a brand mostly through ads online if you wanted to. It's changed so much that now the way that you build a brand is through content, organic content, storytelling. That's so important. And even if you look at yourself as a consumer and what you pay attention to online, you're not really interested in a brand selling you this water bottle. But if I come on here and I tell you my story of how I started this out of my car down the road because I had no money and I am a single mom, I mean, I'm already sold. I'm like, cool, where do I buy? Like, there I am. The second part of my answer is, like, I would audit yourself. I'll give you an example. When I started Female Startup Club, I was so shy. I was so shy on camera. I was so scared public speaking. I am still scared public speaking. It's still a thing I'm working on. But I had this feeling inside me of, like, I know that this is a skill set that I want to have, and I know it's important for what the future of content is going to be and, like, for what I want for my life. So I'm going to do it. And it took me like 70 episodes to start feeling more confident in my interview skills. And to get there, I had to really build that skill set for myself, but I really wanted it. So I would audit yourself and be like, do I actually not want to be on camera because I'm scared and I kind of wish that I could, but I actually don't want to because of that fear? Or am I someone who's like, no to social media, I just hate it, I don't want to be on it, and I don't ever want that for myself? If you fall into the first category where you're like, oh, I kind of wish that I could do it, but I'm just scared, just totally go for it. No one is good when they get started. Like, it takes practice, and you can do things like small exercises, like filming yourself on TikTok and not posting them. Do like 30 videos and don't post them. Get used to your face on camera. Get used to the sound of your voice. Send your friends voicemails or voice notes on WhatsApp. Play it back to listen to your voice and get used to it. Those kind of things can help build your confidence a little bit. And then when you're ready, you can start posting. But I think the answer, like the actual answer in today's world, is you need to be the face of the brand. No one is ever going to tell your story as good as you're going to tell your story. And no one is ever going to be able to sell your stuff as good as you, because you are going to be the most passionate person about what you're doing. No one else will be. Hard truths.
I think we all needed that pep talk. Also, though, I do want to add, because I always like to, play devil's advocate. That's just me. I think that Doone is absolutely correct that if you have a personal brand, undoubtedly business will always be a little bit easier for you, in the sense that, like, I think a personal brand is leverage and it gives you an unfair advantage. That said,
Yes.
is it possible to build a very successful business without ever being the face of it? Yes. Also, yes. I think that that's the beauty of business, is in many ways, it's kind of like a board game that has no rules. It really is. It's like, okay, this is the outcome I want. And you just get to like test different things. You're like a little scientist in a lab and you just test hypotheses all the time. And I think the key thing is to realize that just because something doesn't go the way that you think it went, it's actually not a fail, right? It's like you get that data and you get to adjust your hypotheses and try again. And so I think really what it comes down to, though, is that people do connect to people at the core level and
Right.
stories. So
Yeah.
if you're determined, like if you're like, I absolutely do not want a personal brand, and that's the decision you make, fine. But you have to then figure out other ways that you're going to elevate. Maybe it's your
Mhm.
customers and their
Mhm.
stories. You have to find other ways to foster personal connections. It doesn't always have to be you, but thinking about who else, within your community or within your customer base, you're able to tell stories through instead.
And I will say as well, I think it's different if you're building a consumer-facing brand versus a B2B enterprise brand. So if I think about, I have some friends who have a consulting business, they must turn over about 50 million a year. Probably no one on this call has ever heard of them. And if I showed you a photo, you'd be like, I don't know who that is. Like, they don't have Instagram followers, they're not on TikTok, but they have a personal brand and they're thought leaders in the spaces that matter, with very, very senior execs in Fortune 100 companies. So in the places that matter, they have a personal brand. I have another friend who has a very successful food and beverage business. And again, no one here would know who they were, but in those very niche, like delicacy food communities, they're kind of a big deal. Again, they don't have TikTok or whatever, but like the people that matter and the people that have the power to pay them know who they are. So I think you can kind of choose your own adventure, kind of to Ellen's point. That's business, that's side hustling, that's your professional life, is choose your own adventure. You don't have to be tethered to the job that you're in, especially if you hate it. You can, if you want, you can do both. You can do a hybrid. You can negotiate to do 3 days a week at work and 2 days on your side hustle. I have a friend who does that with her jewelry brand. You can do what the three of us have done and run it as a full-time thing. There are no rules, and that's the exciting thing. It's never been easier. There's so many technologies to make stuff easy. You don't have to code your own website. You don't have to like swipe a credit card yourself. It's very possible to do all that for very low cost, if not for free. So please see the three of us as a resource. Like, we're here cheering you on. We want to see you succeed. We want to host you on our podcast in future. We want to feature you on our blogs when you're very successful. So final word of advice from the panel before we wrap up today. What's one step that everyone here can do literally this week? Or we're going into the weekend, I suppose. Like, what's one thing, like a baby step closer, that we can invite everyone to take before they take their next step? And it might be, I'm gonna give my first piece of advice to give you all. I've just sort of thrown this question out there, by the way. We didn't prepare this. My piece of advice is, this weekend, I want you to have a conversation with someone. Like, what is that side hustle that you dream about? Or what's that little itch that you're like, oh, I wish, oh, could I? I don't know. Maybe you just want to start, not just, but maybe you want to start monetizing your Instagram audience. maybe you want to start a Substack newsletter. Maybe you want to start cleaning out your closet and selling it on eBay. Maybe it's something as small as that. Or maybe you'd love to build an online course or a website and you don't know how to do it. So I want to encourage everyone this weekend to have a conversation with your best mate, your roommate, your partner, your auntie, your cousin, I don't care who, one conversation this weekend about something you would dream of doing, even if it seems crazy and bananas and just like out of reach. Just have that conversation and let me know where it leads. Doone, I might throw you in the deep end next. What's your one tip?
So I love that. So I would definitely do that. I would also, as a starting point, also for this weekend, I would think about a topic that you could talk about for the next 10 years, whatever it might be. If it's fashion, or if it's fashion for petite women, or if it's cameras and like equipment, or whatever it might be that you are passionate about, whatever your kind of go-to topic of conversation, and start a TikTok and post one video, or like create one video and not even post it, but like start a TikTok and just do that step of choosing your handle, do a video, maybe you post it, maybe you don't, but like start this kind of content creation vehicle. Because if you can post a TikTok every couple of days or every couple of weeks, just talking about this thing that you love, and you're already building an audience for the day that you're ready to start trying to sell something to that audience, you're going to be in such a great position if you have 500 followers. Even if you have, 100 followers, that's better than no followers. That's 100 eyeballs that might see your stuff. So my one piece of action would, well, I guess it's kind of two, but like get your TikTok handle and like record a potential video to post.
I love it. And just Ellen, before we do that, if everyone wants to put their cameras on, and here's like a hot tip, you can literally just grab your phone out now, take a photo of this, do a cheeky boomerang, or just get some B-roll. I'm just going to record now. And then you can just like put a music track behind it. Yeah. Put faces on screen. Here we go. You can say, I'm taking my first step. You can film this, like use this as content. Tag the three of us, tag Doone, Ellen and I, PepTalkHer, Female Startup Club, Cubicle to CEO, tag us with this, tag us on TikTok, whatever, stitch it, whatever you want to do, use this as content. Like build, like as you're doing your journey, oh my gosh, we've got cameras happening everywhere. This is amazing. So make this your first story, your first TikTok, whatever. Like, here we go. Ellen's getting content. We're all doing it. Like we're gonna hold each other accountable. And by posting this on social media, by putting it on TikTok, on your stories, you're putting it out there into the world. Who knows? Maybe one of your friends wants to do it with you. Maybe someone else has an idea, but you're holding yourself accountable and you're putting it out there to the world. I'm going to do some really cool stuff and I want you to follow along. So that's just piggybacking off you doing there. All right, Ellen, you want to wrap us up for your final word of wisdom for all these amazing folks joining us today?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my one action step, I know this is going to sound really obvious, like duh, but the easiest way to make a sale is to actually ask for a sale. I know this is, again, so basic, but so very few people actually have the courage to directly email or text or message someone that they think they could genuinely help with their skills and say, hey, I noticed that you may have a need for X, or that I've heard that you have a desire for whatever. I think I can actually help you. And here is a suggested way for how we could work together. Send out one pitch to someone, even if it scares the poop out of you. And you can BCC me if you want, and I will give you some inbox encouragement. I'll drop my personal email in the chat. You can seriously do that. And I would love to cheer you on while you do this, because making the ask is one of the hardest things you can do. But I actually took my own advice this year. And in the first 3 months, I sent out so many personalized pitches to people. And guess what, you guys? Our business generated $200,000 in booked campaigns in the first 90 days of this year because of those emails. So do not underestimate the power of making the ask. And oftentimes as entrepreneurs, I think it's really easy for us to place all these other shoulds ahead of staying close to the money. Like we'll go, oh, we need a brand first. We need a logo. We need a website. We need this, that, or the other. Yeah. You actually don't need any of those things. What you need to do is ask someone, can I help you? And if they say yes, give them any way to pay you. It could be PayPal. They can snail mail you a check, whatever it looks like. The easiest and path of least resistance is just to make a simple ask. So that's my final thing.
Start somewhere, film yourself, make that ask and have a conversation. Amazing takeaways, lots of food for thought for your weekend, we hope. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been a delight. My name is Meggie Palmer. Thanks to Doone from the Female Startup Club and the fab Ellen from Cubicle to CEO. We hope that you've enjoyed this conversation. And yeah, don't be strangers. Say hi on social, LinkedIn, email, etc. We're going to circulate this recording so you can forward it to folks who you think might also maybe have a little side hustle itch that they want to scratch. But please let us know the one thing that you're going to take away from today's conversation in the chat. And yeah, if there's anything we can do to support you, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks so much, everyone. Speak soon.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.